Like Me, My Journey to Manhood and the Mistakes I Made Along the Way is a new book written by community activist Butch Kennedy. Today, I talk one on one with Butch for this edition of Quintin's Close Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close Ups on Facebook. Butch Kennedy, welcome back to the award winning Quintin's Close Ups.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Quintin. It's always good to see you, bro.
Yes, sir. Obviously, in the past, we've talked about obviously domestic violence, which you're trying to help, curb and end here in the Low Country beyond. But now you are an author of a book, and I hope I get this right: A Man Like Me, My Journey to Manhood and the Mistakes that I Made Along the Way.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's it. You got it.
Who is Butch Kennedy now as an author?
Butch Kennedy is the same old Butch Kennedy, man. It's weird that how this book came across, because I actually wrote the book because I was doing a training. And in that training, I kind of started sharing stories about me. And before I knew it, I was writing a book, man. And it essentially, it wrote itself.
And a matter of fact, let me go to it because you sent me a copy of it this morning. I want to, obviously read some excerpts of it. It says this: I was supposed to know that all men have to be strong, tough, never show weakness or emotion, and most of all, never cry. All my life, I've tried to live up to those expectations, and all my life, I've failed. Let me ask you this, Butch. How did you turn those failed expectations into obviously life lessons?
Yeah, it's great, man, because I learned that what we as men learn at a young age is a lot of misconceptions. We all have the wrong idea about what manhood really is. And basically, a lot of it's not everything about it is wrong, right? But there's certain things about it that are wrong. And when I finally figured it out, and I lived a long time before I actually figured it out. I just wanted to make sure that I put it together so that other people don't have to wait as late in their life to figure it out as well.
And how late did you have to learn?
I'm still learning, man. I'm still learning. This journey thing goes on forever. But, like I said, when I got to a point where I realized, man, that, I was my biggest hindrance. You know what I mean? A lot of life lessons that I learned, were self-inflicted wounds that I inflicted upon myself. And that's what a lot of us men do because we as men don't know any better. So that's what I tried to share with people. I wanted them to make sure that they understand that they're going to make the same mistakes that I did, right? So if I tell you about the mistakes I made, maybe that at least you won't try to repeat some of the mistakes I made. And that was the gist of what I did and why I did it.
And those self-inflicted wounds that you caused on your own, what still plays in your mind today?
Well, it still plays in my mind today as to, how I was taught about things and how people viewed me because in my book, I talk about, my younger days. I call it my adolescence years. And a lot of people don't know this about me, but I used to be on a band and I used to be a DJ. So I spent a lot of time out on the road, and I did a lot of things out on the road. And I learned a lot about myself, things that I shouldn't have done. I did. And I shared a lot of those things, and it's a growth process. And I tried to share that growth process with other men so other men can realize, that, I'm going through stuff too as well. So how do I get to the other side? That's the point. How do I get across this bridge? And what I tried to do is when men fall down, we usually as other men are not there to help them up, right? So sometimes we just let them stay down. My goal is to lift men up. I learned this through watching women empower other women, and I realized, we as men, we don't lift each other up. You know what I mean? It's you on your own, brother, and that's just a difficult situation to be in. And I realized at one point in my life I was on my own, and I had to pick myself up. So from that on, I wanted to make sure that that any other young men that go through the same thing that I go through, I'll be there to help them get up.
And what is your growth process plan right now?
My growth process plan right now is to be the greatest grandfather that I can possibly be, to make this world a better place for my grandson, man. And it's crazy right now, man. I'm a grandfather now. So, and that's something that happened. I don't think we talked since then.
No, sir.
So this is something new to me, man. And I just want a better world for my grandson. I don't want him to have to grow up living the same lies and misconceptions that I grew up living. You know what I mean? I want young men to understand that we are much better than we have ever been advertised, right? The society and everybody's so quick to down men, especially black men, right? And it's important for people to realize, man, that not all of us are the same. And a lot of them are just misguided. And my goal is to bring everybody into the fold, man. My goal is to redefine what this thing is that we call manhood. And it'll be a thing that all us men do together. It won't be anything that society dictates. It'll be what men dictate. And that's the important part of the entire conversation. That's the important part of the entire book. And that's what the journey portion of my manhood was.
And you talk obviously about the lies and misconceptions that you obviously had to endure at a younger age. What are those lies and misconceptions that you still are enduring today and still seeing today?
the same thing, man. It all has to do with relationships. It all has to do with the way we treat women, man. As a kid, I was praised by my elders by how many conquests that I had, right? How many women that I was able to deal with, or how many women I was able to have sex with. So and I was treated differently because the availability of women was easy for me because I was on the band and I was a DJ. So the more women that I had on my side, the more the people that looked up to me, right? And I realized at an older age that even my nephew coming up, man, I would talk to him all the time, and he had a girlfriend that he really liked, right? And he's like, man, I really love this girl, man. I'm like, man, you're not supposed to just settle yourself down with one woman, man. You a wheeler, man. You're supposed to have many women, man. So, and he wanted to be with this one woman, man. And I turned his whole head around, man, just like my head was turned around. And that's where I talk to men about. That's the conversations that we men have. I mean, why do we do things like that? And how do we continue this cycle, man? We continue the cycle, and I want to break that cycle. And the only way to break that cycle is to bring men together to break it together.
And also in the book, you said this too. I can count on the times on one hand that I openly cried. I remember as a 7-year-old playing football for Mary Dobkin in Baltimore, Maryland. I was just like Rudy Huxtable, sweet feet on the Cosby Show. I remember scoring the game-winning touchdown and all the accolades and praises that I received from other parents. What did you cry about?
The funny thing about it is all year long. I was like maybe 7 years old. But all year long, we were winning. We were a winning team. We got into the championship game and we lost in the championship game. So I wasn't actually crying, right? So I was actually sitting at the kitchen table and I was sulking. And my father came home, and my father was in the Army. And when he came home, he saw his son sitting at the kitchen table sulking, and he saw my wife, doing dishes. I mean, his wife doing dishes. And he asked her, he says, "What's wrong with the boy?" And she tells him, they lost the game. And from that moment on, he looks at me and he walks over to me and he starts smiling. He starts teasing me. He starts singing to me. He says, "Cry, baby, cry. Stick a finger in your eye and let the water cry." So I started crying. And then my father got upset and he looked at me and said, "Now go upstairs. I'm going to give you something to cry about." And my father took me upstairs and he gave me something to cry about. So that's one of the times that I learned a very valuable lesson. And a lot of men relate to that lesson. That's what the entire book is about. It's not just about my journey. It's about the journey of all men. And that's why if you look on the cover, there's a lot of silhouettes there. It's not just one silhouette there. There's a lot of silhouettes there, and they represent different men. Because throughout life, every man is going to go through a journey, and every man is going to cross paths in some way. Now, you might turn right on your journey. I might turn left on mine, but we're still on the same journey, and that journey is the quest of manhood. And that day, I learned a very valuable lesson that a lot of men learn. And that's those emotions and those feelings that I had on that day that I could no longer have. So I shut down like most men do. And I never let that happen again. At least around my father, I didn't.
Right. And you also said this too. At 7 years old, I was devastated, not only because I got a whooping, but because somehow I had disappointed my father. What was your the definition, that is, of disappointment at the age of 7?
Yeah, my definition was I got a whooping for my behavior. So he couldn't be happy with me if he was going to beat me for my behavior. So what I did was wrong. It was displeasure in his eyes that motivated me to do better. And the sad reality is, Quintin, is that all my life I've tried to live up to his expectations of what a man should be. And it's amazing to me that, and I tell my wife this all the time, it's amazing to me that all my life, I went through my life looking for the approval of my father, the love and approval of my father. And the sad reality is I think it was 4 years ago. It was during the last election when Hillary Clinton was running against Bernie Sanders. I was just on CNN, And for the first time in my life, after that CNN segment, I got a text from my father. And the text simply said, "I'm proud of you and I love you." And that came from my father, Quintin. And I'm 50 plus years old, man. And I've never heard them words before.
Right.
Right. But even to see them in a text message, to me, it did something to me. You know what I mean? Right. But then I had to think back and sit back and say, well, why couldn't he call me and tell me that? You know, why couldn't he just pick up the phone and say that? So even in that moment, I thought of triumph and actually getting what it was that I've been looking for all my life. You know, I saw some negativity in it. And I thought, you know, that if my father wanted to say that, he could have said it hundreds of thousands of times because, you know, I'm his son. Right. And that's one thing that we as men have not been taught. We have not been taught, you know, to go out there and just tell our kids that we love them and hug them. And I see a generation of young men that are doing that now. Right. But when I was coming up, man, it was a different era, man. I mean, my uncles and everybody would always tell me they were proud of me and they would hug me. But my father, man, he was a different animal. And I tell everybody, man, everybody says, well, and everybody who reads the books thus far, they have an animosity towards my father. But I say, you know, if it wasn't for my father, I wouldn't be the man that I am today. Right? Because I would be like my brother or like my sister, you know, because he was a little more, he was a little more receptive to them and treated them differently. So I said to everybody that I don't know if I'd be on this crusade. I don't know if I would be out here talking to people. I don't know if I'd be on your show if my father hadn't treated me the way that he did, because it built that fire inside me, that flame inside me to do what it is that I do. And you know, just to have him even on a text message saying that what I did made him proud, to me, that just had to be enough.
And, you know, you said this too, as a little boy, that's the last thing you ever want to do is see the disapproval in your father's eyes. I learned a valuable lesson that day. And from that day forward, I vowed to never let it happen again, as you just mentioned. You said this too, somehow, unbeknownst to me, I had crossed that line. In my father's eye, I had done the unthinkable. And it was his responsibility to make sure it never happened again. You said it was his responsibility to make sure it never happened again, you wrote. What was your responsibility?
To never let it happen again. It was my responsibility to grow up and be just like my father needed me to be. It was my responsibility to grow up and receive text messages like the one I got, 4 or 5 years ago, all my life. I was supposed to it was my responsibility to make my father proud of me all my life. And to realize that I had finally attained that goal and I finally reached that goal, I thought that, you know, it's like I'd won the lottery, man. But you know, I realized, you know, that with winning the lottery, you know, there are some things that come along with winning the lottery. So I realized something in writing the book. And it's funny because the book came out as me just writing my training for my summer training. And there's a chapter in the book called the map. It's our journey to manhood. So there's a chapter in the book, and that's what I was doing. I was working on the map to manhood. And from that, I started just remembering stories, and I just started typing them down. And before I knew it, there was a chapter done, and then there was 2 chapters done. And I figured I might as well go ahead and write the book.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. And you also said this too. My dad lived the adage, spare the rod and the spoil the child. And unbeknownst to me, I committed a cardinal sin, one worthy of the punishment that I received. To my father, my actions crossed an imaginary line, and it was his responsibility to ensure it never happened again. The only problem was that at 7 or 8 years old, I had no idea what the rules were. When did you learn about the rules?
I learned about the rules as I got older. As I started doing what I do, dealing with domestic violence, when I started seeing the effects of domestic violence, and I started talking to men that were perpetrators of domestic violence. And I wondered, you know, how could we as men do something like that to a woman, especially the woman that we love or the woman that we are in a relationship with. And then I realized that a lot of men just don't know how to step back. A lot of men don't think it's okay to walk away. And that's what I teach men, that it's okay to step back. It's okay to walk away. It's okay to take a deep breath and think about things. So that's why I learned, man. And there were some life lessons that I learned, a lot of life lessons that I shared. A lot of them that I'm not proud of. And my daughter reads it and she looks at me and says, well, you self-inflicted yourself the majority of your life. I said, yeah, and that's what a lot of men do. And a lot of men just don't have or are not fortunate enough to realize that. So when I do my trainings and I explain things to men, because how we got here is very important. I mean, you can't just walk into a room and tell people, you know, to do this or to do that or to do certain things. You got to explain to them how we got to this point and then how we move forward. So that's the most important thing. Not only how we got here, but how we move forward. I got there as a little kid, and I realized, you know, my behavior was against this imaginary code that we have as men, and that men makes us emotionless creatures. So we're not allowed to show any form of emotion. Crying is a form of emotion. Love is a form of emotion. So my question to men has always been, if we're emotionless men, how do we show love? How does your wife, or how does your woman know that you love her if you can't show any emotion, man? That's a deep thing. That's a deep concept for men to follow. But we as men have been taught, you know, from day one, that these are things that we just don't do. And what really surprised me, though, Quintin, is about a year ago when Kobe passed away, when Kobe died in the helicopter accident. You see men of all colors and all creeds, man, openly, you know, weeping for Kobe. And that to me just shows me where we came as a society, how far we've come as a society. Because you rarely ever, I don't ever recall a time when I've seen a group of black men, especially with the platform that they have, share that form of emotion. Yeah, that was powerful.
And you also said in the book too, I often look back at things like this as well as my failed relationships and the role I played in shaping that outcome. Truth is, I had no idea. I was just like many other young boys who were just trying to figure it out. What does it mean to be a man now?
Man, it's awesome. There's nothing better than being a man, and I'm so fortunate to know a lot of great men in our community that are just doing positive things, and that are spending a lot of great time with their children.
Sure.
Right? So it's important the time that we spend with our children and our families, and it's important the love that you show to that wife, man. And I often see men that are out there saluting their women all the time, and to me, that's just a powerful thing. That shows my kids that follow me that love is something that we as men can share. Love is okay for us as men to share, because we as men are emotionless creatures, right? And love is the biggest emotion. So we're breaking that stereotype each and every day.
Yes, sir. And you said this too. So days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, but the party was always on. I was living the nightlife, one filled with music and women. I was a single man without a conscience, and we played everywhere. We opened up for Bill Summers and Summer Heat, Call It What You Want. Von Mason and the crew, Bunk's Rock Skate Roll, came to hear us play. We played at the Township Auditorium, Benedict College, and introduced Luther Vandross when he came to Columbia after he left the group Change. When did you, Butch, as a single man back then, get your conscience?
Wow, I don't think I had one back then. to be 100% honest with you, I don't think I really had one back then. I think, just like I said, I was a man without a conscience. And every night it could have been a different woman. I mean, even though it always wasn't, but it could have been. And it was easy because they were easily accessible. The nightlife to me was amazing, because I got to meet a lot of great people, a lot of great entertainers. And I got to meet Morris Day and the Time. I mean, it's just crazy, man, that I was on stage with some of these guys, and these guys have done a lot of great things. Our band was actually in the studio with Cameo. So to say that, I say that to say this, my life flipped and turned around 100%. And a lot of people who know me now know it's very difficult to get me into a club, or to get me to be a DJ, or to get me to do any of the stuff that I did in my past, because my past is my past, and I try to leave it there. But the road was even though there were some great times, and I loved it, I really enjoyed it. There was some great time on the road. It was really hard, man. I'm going from place to place. You're always on the road. You're always traveling. You're always eating out of little greasy spoons. Some of the clubs aren't as clean as the other clubs are, man. So it was trying, but man, once you got on stage, man, you forgot all about all that stuff, man. Forgot all about it. No, that portion of my life, I'll never forget. It was great. Man, I had a great life, man.
Great life, I know. And who was Butch Kennedy on stage?
Butch Kennedy on stage. I shared some pictures. I think I shared some pictures in the book, which is really weird, because I look back at myself now. I'm like, who is that dude, man? Who is that dude? And the thing about it is some of the members of the band are still my friends. They're my friends on Facebook, and we talk all the time, man. And I thank them all the time, because because I could have done a lot worse in my life. But those guys, they were my big brothers, and they made sure that they took care of me. So I thank them a lot for taking care of me. But Butch Kennedy, man, he was a lot of fun, man. It was fun. They called me Hat when I was on the band because I like Teddy Pendergrass used to wear that big cowboy hat.
Sure.
I always had a big cowboy hat. I thought I was Teddy Pendergrass, man. You can't tell me nothing, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. We were bringing it, man. We played outdoor concerts, man. We played to field places. When we came to your town,
right,
everybody came. So I mean, those were and we're talking about the early '80s. We're talking about the late '70s, early '80s,
right.
and it was a different era. It was a different world, man.
Which musical artist resembles you today?
I think there's different stages of me, and when I talk about me, because when I played at a young age, I was a percussionist, and the only person that I know that plays like me is Sheila E.
Yes,
Sheila E is a beast, man, and that's the instrument that I played when I first started off as a young musician, and then I started playing keyboards.
Yes,
and I'm trying to figure out who would be that person, because what I did when I was on the second band was I actually led a lot of songs. I was actually a singer as well as a musician. And we did a lot of songs, man. My guy I used to love to hear Ray Parker Jr. sing, man. I loved Teddy Pendergrass, but I couldn't. Luther was the hardest for me to catch, man. I couldn't do anything with Luther, man. We tried, but
right.
I couldn't. But he was a phenomenal talent, man. So I would say that I was more like a Teddy Pendergrass type guy.
As a matter of fact, in the book you said this, but what sticks with me the most was obviously the Carolina Coliseum, where we were on the circular stage. On the other side of the stage, a play was going on, and then there were thousands of people in attendance where the play ended the stage began to rotate, and I played Left Screw by Earth, Wind, and Fire. What a life. Everyone rushed the stage, and the party was on. We partied for a while before Lady Jam came and tore down the house, singing I Who Have Nothing. Take me back to that time. What still plays in your mind?
Let me tell you something, man. There was nothing like it, because we were on one side of the stage,
yes.
and we don't see nothing that's going on the other side of the stage, right? We're all set up, and we were a different animal, man, because our equipment and everything was white, and we had like this. It was almost like a spaceship, and everything that we had lights around the top of us around the spaceship, and it was a beautiful thing. And when we turned around and that song came on, you would not believe the response that we got from people. And Lady Jam, if you've never heard the song "I Who Have Nothing," Luther Vandross used to sing it as well.
Okay.
But a group called Midnight Blue sang it. It really made it really, really well known. Lady Deborah Bailey, who was on the band that I was on with as well, she sang it as well. But when Lady Jam sang it, you would think that all of them were on the stage, man. She really put it in. She put the work in. Every place we went, people wanted to hear her sing that song, and she delivered every night, man. And I'm telling you, Quintin, man, for I want to say like 5 or 6 years, every Friday, Saturday night, every holiday, even some days during the week, man, we were just booked solid. And I lost my job, and I was making more money as a DJ than I was when I lost my job. So
wow.
So those were good years, man. Those were good years.
Good years. But what type of songs would you play today if you wanted to?
Oh my God. The thing about today is a lot of songs aren't being played by bands. A lot of there's not really any bands that play music anymore. I love, as I get older, I love to listen to music by Kirk Franklin. And sure. I love gospel music, man. There's a young gentleman out, and he's a good friend of mine. His name is Choice. I love his music, man. And I think the sad reality is people in Charleston don't even know who he is. And he's Charleston's own, man. If you just pick up one of his CDs, man, I mean, he had a CD called Transition. And to this day, I always tell him, man, that's probably one of my favorite CDs. But, a lot of stuff, he does it all on his own. And we were different, man. We kind of broke up. We sent our demo out to Sugar Hill Records. And before I joined the military, man, they called me. And they said, hey, why don't you come on in and record on Sugar Hill Records? And that never happened. So I just wonder where my life would have went had I not joined the military. We'd have gone to Sugar Hill Records. We'd have had an album out or something. I'm not sure.
Hey, absolutely. And you all said this too. We were a package deal. We hit them with from every angle, night after night, every weekend, from one club to another. And as you just mentioned, we even recorded a demo and sent it off to Sugar Hill Records among a few other record labels. What were those other record labels?
Back in the day, I'm trying to remember the other record labels that we sent it to, but I know Sugar Hill responded. I know Motown was one of the labels that we sent it to. I mean, we just sent the demo out, man, just hoping that it would stick and land somewhere and that people would like it.
Yes.
Because we would play it in the clubs and people, man, they loved it in the clubs, man. So we figured, that people would like it. And the funny thing is that, I was from the same era as a group called Sequence, and that's the group that Angie Stone sings from.
Right.
Sing on it. Angie Stone is huge now.
Yes.
So we're from the same area, and a lot of people don't realize this, and I never realized it at the time. But I was DJing someplace, and Angie Stone and them at the time, they wanted to come on stage, and I kind of kicked them off stage. I did not know that. I did not know who they were, but I put them off stage, man. And then a week or two later, I see them on was it Soul Train or some other show. I said, that's them.
Right.
And they had actually come to one of our gigs to see us, and they wanted to go on stage. And I just didn't know. You live and you learn, man. I look at Angie Stone all the time. I'm like, man, I kicked her off stage. What was that?
Just imagine if you could think with her.
Yeah, what was I thinking? Yeah. So that was me, man. That was it, man. And I grew as a man, and I grew as a person, and I realized that the level of maturity is what makes the man. But I want to make other young men at a younger age mature a lot faster. You know what I mean? I want them to understand some of the mistakes that I made so that they don't repeat the mistakes that I made. Papa Smurf always says, and I tell everybody this all the time, Papa Smurf always tells me that if I go down the hall and I see the boogeyman down the hall, and I come back up and tell you that the boogeyman's down the hall, and you go down there anyway, and the boogeyman gets you, it ain't on me. It's not on me. So he tells our kids that all the time, and I believe that analogy, man, that if I tell you something that happened to me and you go out and you repeat it, then you know it's going to happen, right? So that's what I expect to happen.
And you all said this too, but like always, all good things must come to an end. Mm-hmm. When did all of that come to an end?
The funny thing about it is we would play, like I said, we played a lot. So a lot of times we were traveling home, it's like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. The sun's not even up yet. Right. But this one particular night, everybody stayed up, man. Everybody stayed up. And that was the night that the drummer on the band decided that he didn't want to dress with everybody. He came in his own path. And that upset Lady Jam. And at the end of the night, she actually fired him. But they argued all the way home. Now, we were maybe 2 hours away from home. And they argued all the way home about him not doing the right thing. And when we got to the house, the last words I remember her saying is that you're fired. And everything kind of changed from that moment on. And the group kind of changed a little bit from that moment on as well. So that's when everything changed for me as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, if people want to buy your particular book, where should they go?
Amazon, man. We're on Amazon. If you go to Amazon, you just go in the search engine and search for the title A Man Like Me, and it pops right on up. You can get a copy. Quintin, you read some excerpts from it. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. A lot of people, when I wrote the book, a lot of parts that I wrote were pretty hard for me to write because I had to look in the mirror once again, and I had to basically own my own mess because I want to make sure that everybody understands that no man is perfect, right? And I wanted to show my imperfections, and I wanted people to understand the journey that I've been on and how good God is that he brought me through this journey, right? And when I was a little kid, man, my grandmother's name used to say this, God's brought me a mighty long way. All the time they say that, and I never understood what they meant. And that's what this book represents, that God had brought me a mighty long way. And from there to here, man, a lot of people don't believe that little Butch Kennedy, the Butch Kennedy who used to raise all the ruckus in Colombia, is now the Butch Kennedy that's going all over talking about not beating up on women. And I'm going to be honest with you, Quintin, as a young kid, when I was a DJ, I played my music so loud that they would call the police on me every day. Every day, the police knew me they knew my name. I couldn't go anywhere. Every police officer knew my name. I was always in trouble as a little kid. And it was only because I played my music too loud. And all the kids in the neighborhood wanted to come by because every day there's a party at my house.
Right.
But nothing was going on but music, and all the kids love to listen to music, man. So, and it's funny because a lot of them are still on my Facebook to this day, and they'll chime in every now and again, remembering the good old days. But yeah, it's powerful, man, and it basically was a journey that was not easy, and there were some difficult times within my journey that I shared, and hopefully that other men will read it. And a lot of them have read it, and they've told me that they've had similar experiences in their journey, and we can share our stories. And not only do we share our stories, we share our healing, and that's what this is about. This is about healing, and that's a powerful statement when it comes from men. When we talk about what we as men need to do to become better men.
Are you in anywhere close to your healing?
The thing with healing is, and I would say that I am healed, but what I did as a young kid is I would build up walls to protect myself, right? And the funny thing about those walls is I never knew how many walls I had built up until I met Lisa. Until I got remarried again. Yes. And Lisa came and knocked all the walls back down again. I'm like, okay, so now I'm vulnerable again, right? So yeah, right now I feel like I'm in the best that I've ever been. But to be honest with you, what I learned, Quintin, is that a lot of the relationships that I was in, even the failed relationships, a lot of them failed because of things that I did. And that's a difficult pill for me to swallow. I mean, it was not always on another person. A lot of them were my mistakes and mistakes that I made. And I wanted other men to understand that, and the mistakes we made are basically because of how we were raised. We were taught certain things at a young age that validated what we did at an older age. And those things that we validate, those things that we thought that we were supposed to be and we thought that we were supposed to be or do are not always right. And those are things that we as men need to have a conversation about, because we're much better than we're advertised.
And I gotta reread the name, but obviously the title of the book, A Man Like Me, My Journey to Manhood and the Mistakes I Made Along the Way.
Right.
If you were to give that to your father right now, what would he say?
I think my father's already read it. My father's already read it, and I know he the sad reality is Quintin is I believe, and I've already accepted who my father is and who he will be in my life. Okay, so and I know that what I said in my book was true, and what I said in my book, not all of it paints him as in a good light. Not the whole book doesn't paint him in a good light. But what I need people to understand, and what he needs to understand, is that had he been any different, I wouldn't be who I am. Okay, had he been the father that I thought that I needed, I probably wouldn't be the person that I am today. And that, to me, that's important, because I love the person that I am today. I loved a lot of things about my life, but there were some things in my life that, that were very difficult to deal with, very tragic, man. As a little kid, man, when I would hear the rattle of a belt, I had nightmares as a little kid. The rattle of a belt would just terrify me, man, because I thought my father was coming to get me. But those things strengthened me, and those things made me into the man that I am today. And a lot of men go through a lot of similar things, but not exactly the same thing.
Butch Kennedy, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Always good to see you, Quintin. Always good to see you, man.
Likewise.
Take care of yourself.
Oh,
God bless you, bro.
Same to you.